Hello everyone, myself Preeti Kiran, PGT Chemistry from Kendriya Vidyalaya No. 1, Air Force Station, Hindon. Dear students, we are doing solid state, the first unit of class 12th chemistry. In the previous video, I told you about the imperfections in the solid. This is the fourth video. Dear students, you all know about the physical properties of the solids like shape, density, rigidity, volume, etc. There is an important property of the solids, that is conductivity. You know that the metals are the good conductors of the electricity due to the free electrons. But dear children, all the solids are not good conductors and they do not conduct electricity to the same extent. Some have very high conductivity, but few they don't have at all. So on the basis of the conductivity, on the basis of the how much they conduct the current, they are categorized into three types: the conductors, insulators and the semiconductors. Nowadays, we are using so many electronic and the magnetic devices, and we cannot think of our life without electrical and the magnetic properties of the solids depend upon the internal composition and the structure. Today, we will study about the electrical and the magnetic properties of the solids. The electrical properties. Solids, they exhibit the amazing range of the electrical conductivity ranging from 10 raised to power 10 raised to power minus 20 to 10 raised to power 7 ohm inverse meter inverse. There are three types of solids based on the electrical conductivities: the conductors, insulators and the semiconductors. First of all, conductors. The electrical conductivity ranges from 10 raised to power 4 to 10 raised to power 7 ohm inverse meter inverse. Now you know that the conductors are of two types: the metallic conductors, and in the same chapter I told you about the ionic solids, that when they are in the molten state they also conduct. So broadly the conductors are of two types: the metallic conductors and the electrolytic conductors. So first deal with the metallic conductors. The conductance is due to the movement of the electrons under the influence of the electric potential, which allow electricity to pass through them without undergoing any chemical change. They conduct electricity in the solids as well as in the molten state. And the conductivity of the metals decreases on increasing of the temperature. It is just because when we increase the temperature, the kernels start vibrating and they interrupt the free movement of the electrons. Now the electrolytic conductors. In the ionic solids, conduction is due to the migration of ions under the applied field. They undergo the chemical change. They conduct electricity only when they are in the molten state. We have studied earlier in this unit only. Their conductivity increases with the increase of the temperature. Insulators. The electrical conductivity ranges from 10 raised to power minus 20 to 10 raised to power minus 10 ohm inverse meter inverse. A perfect insulator does not exist, but some materials such as glass, paper, Teflon, sulfur, phosphorus, etc. behave as insulators. Now, the semiconductors. The electrical conductivity ranges from 10 raised to power minus 6 to 10 raised to power 4 ohm inverse meter inverse. Their conductivity ranges between the conductors and the insulators. They can be the pure elements like silicon or germanium, or the compounds such as gallium arsenide. Now the effect of temperature on the conductivity. In the case of the conductors or the metals, the conductivity decreases with the increase in the temperature, because the positive ions of the metals, they start vibrating and they produce hindrance in the flow of electrons. This just now I told you. There is an increase in the conductivity of insulator with the increase in the temperature. And in the case of semiconductors, it increases by increasing the temperature as more electrons can jump from the valence band to the conduction band. This portion we will take in detail later in the slides. Now, the band theory of the metals. Dear students, now you have to understand that what is this band theory, what is this band model, and in the figure here you can see the valence band, the conduction band, the forbidden energy gap. You have to understand all these terms to explain the behavior of the conductors, insulators and the semiconductors. The difference in the electrical conductance behavior of the conductors, insulators and semiconductors is explained with the help of band model. So now let me explain what is this band model and what are these bands. Dear children, just you have to revert back to your class 11th and you know that there are electrons in the atom and these are revolving around the nucleus. And you also know and you have to remember that these electrons are distributed in the various energy levels and you write the electronic configuration following certain rules like Pauli's exclusion principle, Aufbau principle and the Hund's rule. The electrons of a single isolated atom occupy the atomic orbitals and each orbital forms a discrete energy level. When the multiple atoms join together to form a molecule, their atomic orbitals combine to form the molecular orbitals. This also you have studied in class 11th in the molecular orbital theory. When the atoms combine to form the molecule, their atomic orbitals also overlap and then you get a molecule and the molecular orbitals. So the molecular orbitals which are very close in energy to each other, they form a band. Now I am taking an example of sodium and explaining you all this. Now dear children, just think that, assume that there is a sodium atom. You know that its atomic number is 11. So when you write its electronic configuration, it comes out to be 1s2, 2s2, 2p6 and 3s1. And you know that orbitals are filled in the order of increasing energy. So this is the electronic configuration of one sodium atom. Now let us suppose that there is another sodium atom. There is a second sodium atom. Obviously that sodium atom will also be having the same electronic configuration, but there will be a slight difference in the energy levels. When these two sodium atoms, they come closer and they overlap and they behave like a molecule, then their atomic orbitals also overlap to form the molecular orbitals. You have also studied about the bonding molecular orbitals and the anti-bonding molecular orbitals. So when the sodium atoms come closer, their atomic orbitals have also overlapped and now they are known as the molecular orbitals. If there are two sodium atoms, then there will be two 1s orbitals, two 2s orbitals, and the same way the 2p orbitals will be 2. And the electrons will be filled in these so-called molecular orbitals. Now we can have another sodium atom, the third one. Now what will happen? Then we'll have the third 1s energy level here and so on. Now let's think of a sodium metal piece. Let it be a 1 mole piece and then you can very well imagine that there will be 6.022 into 10 raised to power 23 sodium atoms. Now each sodium atom will be having the same electronic configuration and when they will overlap, then we will have this type of, you can visualize this type of structure, because 10 raised to power 23 1s orbitals will be here. 10 raised to power 23 orbitals will be here with the tiny energy gaps which can be ignored, and it will behave like a band. It will behave like a band. We have to ignore the slight differences in the energy levels. The same way, all 2s orbitals of all the sodium atoms will behave like a band, and so on. And you know that in 1s orbital there are 2 electrons. So if there are 10 raised to power 23 sodium atoms, then here the number of electrons will be 2 into 10 raised to power 23. Here again the number of electrons will be 2 into 10 raised to power 23. But here, since in the 2p orbitals you have the 6 electron, so here it will be 6 into 10 raised to power 23 molecular orbitals. So now you can visualize it as a band. And now the bands are of two types. The lower energy bands are known as, which are occupied with the electrons, are known as the valence band, and the higher energy orbitals combine to form the conduction band. Let me take valence band and the conduction band in detail. The molecular orbitals which are close in energy to each other, they form a band. Bands are of two types. The valence band, this is the band of the lower energy. This is the energy. So these are the bands of the lower energy, and the conduction bands are the bands of the higher energy. And here you can see the forbidden energy gap. Now what is that? This is the gap between the two bands, the top of the valence band and the bottom of the conduction band. This is very important to differentiate. The size of the forbidden energy gap is very important to know in the case of the conductors, insulators and the semiconductors. Valence band, it is the energy band that comprises of the valence electrons present in the outermost shell of the atomic structure. These valence electrons, when provided with the sufficient energy, they get changed into the free electrons and they move to the conduction band, thereby causing conductivity. It is abbreviated as Vb, capital Vb, and is at a lower energy level than the conduction band in the energy level diagram. The conduction band, an energy band that consists of the free electrons that are responsible for conduction. Basically, the electrons that get moved out from the valence band by experiencing the external force, they reaches the higher energy band in order to support conduction. This band is at higher energy state. Thus, the electrons require a large amount of the excitation energy to reach the conduction band, thereby giving rise to the electric current. It is abbreviated as Cb, and it allows the free movement of electrons inside it. Now I am going to explain this with the help of figure also. Here please understand that since the energy of the conduction band is higher as compared to the valence band, so when the electrons from the valence band has to jump to the conduction band, what does they need? They need some excitation energy. These two bands are separated by certain amount of energy known as the forbidden energy gap. Now just look at here in this figure. This figure is for metal, and here you can see that the valence band and the conduction band are overlapping each other. This is the diagrammatic representation for the insulators. Here you can see the size of the forbidden zone. It's so large here in the insulator. So it will be very difficult for these valence band electrons to jump to the conduction band. And in the semiconductors, the size is of intermediate as compared to the metals and insulators. So they need some thermal energy, and the electrons can move from the valence band to the conduction band. Dear students, here we give you a question that what is the difference between the conductors, insulators and the semiconductors. So please don't stick to your childhood memories and your childhood definitions that they conduct electricity, they don't conduct electricity. Please make your answer up to the mark and mention the conductivity ranges of all the three, and also mention the size of the forbidden zone. Now this I have explained you that in the conductors the two bands overlap and the electrons present in the lower energy band can easily move into the conduction band. And for insulators the gap is very large. Extremely large energy is required to make the valence electrons a free electrons, and since the gap is very large, so the electrons they fail to jump from the valence band to the conduction band. So they show very less or no conductivity. For example, glass. Now the conduction of electricity in the semiconductors. The energy gap is small between the two bands, and the electrons can jump from valence to the conduction band, and they show conductivity although very little, like silicon and germanium. So for the more movement of the electrons, what we do, how we improvise the electrical properties of the silicon and germanium, that we will study now. Conduction of electricity in the semiconductors, this now we have to study in detail. Silicon and germanium, they are electricity in the semiconductors. There are two types of semiconductors: intrinsic semiconductors and the extrinsic semiconductors. Now I'll take each one of them in detail. Intrinsic semiconductors. Silicon and germanium, they behave like intrinsic semiconductors. They show this type of behavior. Now I will explain you how. Silicon and germanium, they both belong to group 14, and in the valence shell they have 4 electrons. That is, they have 4 valence electrons. Now here this is the silicon atom. It is tetracovalently bonded to 4 silicon atoms, and here the octet is complete. 4 electrons of this silicon and 1 each from these adjacent silicon atoms. So here the octet is complete, and these are the covalent bonds because these bonds are formed by the sharing of electrons. Now when we give energy, the bonds they start breaking and few electrons they get free, and they jump from the valence band to the conduction band, and hence the silicon shows the conductivity. Since this conductivity is very low and we cannot use it widely, so we dope silicon and germanium and we improve the conductivity. Let me show you how. The extrinsic semiconductors. The conductivity is increased by adding of impurity, and this phenomena is known as doping. Doping dramatically increases the conductivity of the semiconductors. So how do we do the doping? We add impurities. Now the impurities are of two types: electron rich impurities, donor one, and the electron deficit impurities, that is the acceptors. So now I'll take each one of them, that how the electron rich impurities improve the conductivity behavior of silicon and germanium, and how the electron deficit play their role. Dear children, this is group 15 elements like antimony, arsenic and phosphorus. The group 15 elements have 5 electrons in their valence shell, and the group 13 elements like boron, aluminium and gallium, they have 3 valence electrons. I am repeating once again, the group 15 elements have 5 valence electrons, and the group 13 elements which are in front of you here, they have the 3 valence electrons. Now silicon and germanium belongs to group 14. They have 4 valence electrons. Now Either we will add this as an impurity, electron rich impurity, or we will add this as an impurity, electron deficit impurity. Now in the figure you can see +4, that means it is some group 14 element, silicon or germanium. Now when we add an impurity which is from the 15th group and it is an electron rich impurity, there are 5 valence electrons, then you can see very well in the figure that out of the 5 valence electrons only 4 are involved in the bonding. Just see 1, 2, 3 and 4. Only 4 electrons of the group 15 element are involved in the covalent bonding with the group 14 element. These are group 14 elements. And there is one delocalized electron. This is unbonded electron and it will help in the conductivity. Just see this figure. This is antimony and now antimony impurity is added. It belongs to group 15 and I have added this to the silicon group 14 element. 4 electrons of the antimony are involved in the bonding and this is the free electron, and since the electron is negatively charged, it is n-type semiconductor. That means just you have to remember, when you add an electron rich impurity, then that type of semiconductor is known as the n-type semiconductor and it is due to the free electron. Now we are adding the electron deficit impurities. Now let us suppose we have taken a boron atom. It belongs to group 13. So it has only 3 valence electrons. So the 3 electrons of the boron will be involved in the bonding and there is one electron vacancy here. There is electron deficiency. This is an electron deficient and this is known as hole. Now this hole is positively charged and that is why it is known as a p-type semiconductor. Now what will happen? How a hole helps in the conductivity? Now what will happen, since it is a positively charged region and electron is not here, so the electron from the neighboring atom will come here. When the electron from the neighboring atom will come here, it leaves behind a hole at its place and then that hole will again attract a electron and this way it appears that the holes are moving, and since the holes are positively charged, it is known as a p-type semiconductors. So when the electron deficient impurities are added, we get p-type, and when we add an electron rich impurity, we get an n-type semiconductor. Applications of the semiconductors. A diode is a combination of n-type and p-type semiconductors. Transistors which are NPN or PNP sandwich conductors, and the photodiode is widely utilized in converting light energy into electrical energy. Nowadays the variety of the solid materials have been prepared by combination of group 13 and group 15 elements or group 12 and group 16 elements to simulate average valence of 4 as in silicon or germanium. In these compounds, the bonds are not perfectly covalent and ionic character depends upon the electronegativity difference of the two elements. This is very important question because the question is asked that comment on the bonding of 13-15 group 13-15 compounds or 12 and 16 compounds. So you have to remember this and understand this. Up till now what we have studied, the electrical properties. We studied about the conductors, insulators and semiconductors in the terms of the conductivity range and the size of the forbidden zone. Then we concentrated on the semiconductors. We studied it in detail and we talked about the intrinsic semiconductors, silicon and germanium, the group 14 elements and the extrinsic semiconductors. While discussing the extrinsic semiconductors, I told you that you can add impurities, do the doping to increase the conductivity of the semiconductors so that we can use them in our daily life. So we add impurities. If we add an electron rich impurity, we get n-type semiconductors, and if we add an electron deficit impurities, then we get the p-type semiconductors. This is recapitulation. The electrical conductivity of the metals with decrease in the temperature. So in the case of the metal, when the temperature decreases, the conductivity in the metals increases. When germanium is doped with indium, what type of semiconductor is formed? Now dear children, you have to remember that the germanium is group 14 element, whereas indium is group 13 element. So it is an electron deficient impurity. So due to the holes, the conductivity will increase. So it is a p-type. When boron is doped with silicon, what type of semiconductor is formed? So when boron you all know that is a group 13 element, and silicon is a group 14 element. So when to the group 13 element we are adding silicon, now silicon will act as an electron rich impurity. So obviously it will be an n-type semiconductor. When silicon is doped with arsenic, silicon is group 14 element, arsenic is group 15 element. It's very obvious that it is an electron rich impurity, so it will be a n-type semiconductor. Please do practice to understand the concept and do practice such questions, because now you get MCQs and similar type of short questions in your exams. Magnetism in everyday life. Dear students, now you cannot think of your life without this property of the solids also. You are using ATM cards, you are using electronic bells or generators, you are using magnets in the junk yards to lift up the scraps, etc., and your hard drives and speakers. So now we will study about the magnetic properties of the solids. The magnetic properties of the solid is due to the orbital magnetic moment and the spin magnetic moment. Now what is this? Let's see. You all know that the electrons are revolving around the nucleus in an atom, and there is another movement of the electron. They are spinning also, just like earth, they are spinning also. So due to this movement, there is the orbital magnetic moment, and due to this spin there is a spin magnetic moment, and each electron behaves like a tiny magnet, and it is only responsible for the magnetic properties of the solids. The Bohr magneton is the unit in which you express the magnetic moment. Now the magnetic materials are classified as the diamagnetic substances, that is diamagnetism, paramagnetism, ferromagnetism, antiferromagnetism and ferrimagnetism. Now I am taking each one of them. First of all, diamagnetism. Now what are diamagnetic materials which we have to understand? The diamagnetic material, they experience a repelling force when they are brought near the poles of a strong magnet. They are repelled in the magnetic field. In the absence of the external magnetic field, the net magnetic dipole moment over each atom or the molecule of a diamagnetic material is zero. Why? It is due to the pairing of electrons. The pairing of electrons cancels the magnetic moments and they lose their magnetic character. So whenever there are electrons, paired electrons are present, the substance or the compound will be diamagnetic due to cancellation of the magnetic moments. The common examples here are water, that is ice. We are talking about the solids, so I will say ice, sodium chloride, benzene, etc. When a diamagnetic substance is placed in the magnetic field, the magnetic field lines, they prefer to pass through the surrounding air rather than through the substance. A strong magnet feebly repels a diamagnetic substance. Now just see these magnetic field lines. How do they pass? They prefer to pass in the air, pass through the air. When I will explain you the ferromagnetic substance, just compare here. You can see here the magnetic field lines going through the substance, the ferromagnetic substance. They are concentrated here, but here you can see they are going out. They are moving in the air. Now the paramagnetism. These materials are weakly attracted towards the magnetic field. Paramagnetic materials, they exhibit magnetism when the external magnetic field is applied. The paramagnetic materials, they lose magnetization in the absence of the externally applied magnetic field. They are weakly attracted in the magnetic field till there is an external magnetic field is there. But in the absence of the externally applied magnetic field, they lose their magnetism. It is due to the presence of the unpaired electrons that you have to keep in mind. Whenever there is an unpaired electron, then the magnetic behavior will be paramagnetic, and when the electrons are paired, it will be diamagnetic. When a paramagnetic substance is placed in the magnetic field, the magnetic field lines, they prefer to pass through the paramagnetic substance rather than air. But now again you concentrate here, it is a ferromagnetic substance which is strongly attracted in the magnetic field. But the paramagnetic substances are weakly attracted in the magnetic field. So here they prefer to go through this, pass through this, but compare the lines, the number of the lines and the density of these lines, it is here lesser. Fine. This I have explained you that the difference between the diamagnetic and the paramagnetic substance, and you will study the paramagnetic properties in the transition metals. Now dear children, on the screen you can see a figure and the three names I have written like ferromagnetic substances, antiferromagnetic substances and the ferrimagnetic substance. Now I am taking this in detail, and these arrows are, they are depicting the alignment of the domain. So just see here, here they are all aligned in parallel direction. In the ferromagnetic substances, they are all in one direction, the alignment is in one direction. In antiferro, you can very well see that they are in anti-parallel direction in equal number, and that will impact the properties. Just see here, 3 are in upward direction and 3 are in downward direction. So they are anti-parallel in equal number. Then it is the antiferromagnetic substance. In the ferrimagnetic substance, now here they are anti-parallel but in unequal numbers. Just see here, 2 and 2, 4 in the upward direction and only 2 are in downward direction. So now let's study about all these three substances in detail. Now the ferromagnetism, they are attracted very strongly by a magnetic field. When a ferromagnetic substance is placed in the magnetic field, it is strongly magnetized in the direction of the applied field. Strongly magnetized. Just see the domains, how randomly they are aligned. But when there is an external magnetic field, they are all aligned in one direction. The common examples of the ferromagnetic substances are iron, cobalt and nickel, and there are many others. Ferromagnetism. A material gets magnetized to a very large extent in the presence of an external field. The direction in which the material gets magnetized is same as that of the external field. These materials exhibit magnetization even in the absence of an external magnetic field. That is, they are permanently magnetized, and that is why they are preferred to make the permanent magnets. This is very common question which is asked, that out of the three, like ferro, antiferro and ferri, which will make the better permanent magnets. So your answer will be ferromagnetic substances, because even in the absence of the external magnetic field, they are permanently magnetized. Just see, I've shown you this photograph earlier also, and here you can see the magnetic field lines. They are crowded here, and they are passing through the ferromagnetic substance. In the diamagnetic, they were preferred to go through the air. In the paramagnetic substances, they were lesser in number, but in the ferromagnetic, you can see the crowding. Antiferromagnetism. Now I explained you the alignment of the domains. It is in equal number in the opposite direction. They are anti-parallel, and the domain structure similar to the ferromagnetic substances, but the domains are oppositely oriented, and they cancel out each other's magnetic moment. That is very important. They have cancelled out each other's magnetic moment, and when you are going to calculate the magnetic moment, it comes out to be 0. Here is the example, manganese oxide. Now the last one, the ferrimagnetism. The ferrimagnetism is a phenomena in which the magnetic interaction between any two dipoles align anti-parallel to each other, but they are the anti-parallel directions. The magnitude will not cancel out because their number is unequal. The cancellation of the magnetic moments become incomplete, resulting in a net magnetization in the material. So ferrite and the ferrous ferrites etc. are the common examples of the ferrimagnetic substances. Now this is the formula which will be used to calculate the magnetic moment. This formula is known as spin only formula, and here n is the number of the unpaired electrons, and you will study about this in the unit D and F block elements. So now we have just finished the magnetic properties, and I told you that there are 5 types of magnetic behavior, and that is diamagnetic, they are repelled in the magnetic field; paramagnetic, they are weakly attracted in the magnetic field. The diamagnetism is due to the presence of the paired electrons, and the paramagnetism is due to the presence of the unpaired electrons. And then we have the ferromagnetic substances, the antiferromagnetic substances, and the ferrimagnetic substance, depending upon the alignment of the magnetic domains. Dear children, it is the last part of the video, and few important questions are asked in addition to the theoretical portion which I have taken in these 4 videos. There are few questions which are commonly asked. We are giving notes also, we are supplementing these videos with the notes also. Here you can practice many such questions, but I am taking one of each type. There is a question like, there is a cubic solid and it is made up of the elements P and Q. The atoms of Q are at the corners of the cube and P at the body center. And what is the formula of the compound and the coordination number? Since they have said that the Q are at the corners of the cube, I have told you in the second part of the video that corner contributes only 1/8 and there are 8 corners. So the number of the Q atoms in a unit cell will be 1, because 8 corners and a corner contributes only 1/8. And since P is present in the body center, so it belongs to that complete unit cell, so that is also 1. So the formula of the compound will be PQ and the coordination number will be 8 for both. Many such questions are there in your text and asked in your board exams. They give you variety of situations. They change the question by taking face, and body center, and similar such questions are there and like the atoms in the voids, tetrahedral voids, 2/3 of the tetrahedral void is filled or the octahedral voids are occupied. So do practice such questions. I am not taking because then the video will be very long. Now this is the table which I have shared earlier in the second video, and this table I have taken again this slide again I have taken because there is a relationship between A edge length and R the radius, and it is for the primitive unit cell, face centered and the body centered, and there only I told you you have to remember this relationship between A and R. Now let me take one question and explain you where you need this. This is a text NCERT exercise question. In such questions, what do they give you? They give you the metallic radius. For example, in this question, they have given you the metallic radius 125 picometer in the case of aluminium. And the packing, it is CCP type structure. So now the first question is, what is the length of the side of the unit cell? Since it is the CCP structure, that means you have to, and they are asking for edge length. So this is the relation from the table just now I showed you. A and R are related like this. So you have to take this, you have to use this relation. A is equals to 2 root 2 R. 2 root 2 into 125 picometer, that radius is given, and on solving you get this. Now the second part is, how many unit cells are there in 1 centimeter cube of aluminium? So how many atoms? The volume of the aluminium piece is given 1 centimeter cube. So now you have the edge length of the unit cell in picometers. So first of all you have to find out the volume of the unit cell. Volume of the unit cell will be A cube. Fine. So here the answer is in picometers. So first of all you have to either you calculate first in picometers cube and then change it into centimeters, or the other way, and then just use this formula to find the number of the unit cells in 1 centimeter cube, the volume of the aluminium and the volume of the unit cell. So now you can see that this relation is very important for you for all the types of the unit cells. And then there is a numerical based on the density, that how you can calculate the density or the atomic mass of an element. So first of all you must know the symbols what we are using. For radius we are using R, small r. For edge length we are using small a. For density we are using small d. This is Avogadro's number, and we also need here Z. I've told you what Z is. It is the number of atoms per unit cell. So in such type of numericals, when you have to find out the density or the atomic mass of any metal, so that time you first of all have to remember that what type of unit cell is given, because you know that for the simple unit cell the value of Z is 1, for a body centered unit cell it is 2, and for an face centered unit cell it is 4. Density, you know that it is the mass upon volume, mass of the unit cell upon the volume of the unit cell. So D is equals to Z into M upon A cube into Avogadro's number. So using this formula you can find out whichever variable the question asks. So this is the formula you can see here. Z, I have just now told you, this is the atomic mass, this is the Avogadro's number, and this is A cube. Here is the new question from your book. Silver crystallizes in the face centered cubic lattice. So they have mentioned here it is FCC. If the edge length of the cell is this, edge length is given and the density is also given, find out the atomic mass of the silver. So now you know the value of A, you know the value of D, and from this you can know what is Z. Z will be 4. So this is the formula. Avogadro's number, you know that. So now putting up the value in this, you can very well find out this value of M. That is the atomic mass of silver. Just take care of the units. If the edge length is given in picometers and the density is given in grams per centimeter cube, so please change the edge length picometers to the centimeters. So I hope everything is clear to you, all the electrical properties and the magnetic properties and these numericals. Dear children, we are supplementing all these videos, the 4 videos, with the text material also, and plenty of practicing questions. So do consult that, and I hope watching all these 4 videos will be fruitful to you. Thank you so much.